Industries can be quite different from one another. In some, competition is so intense that only few can earn economic profits. This is the case with companies that operate in the real estate, telecommunications, and IT. On average, we would destroy our wealth by betting on them. At the other end of the spectrum, energy and financial services have great returns on capital, which allow market participants to generate healthy profits. Does it mean that we should only invest in those industries that earned most in the past? Well, not necessarily. While past performance is useful to work with, it's not a perfect indicator of where markets will trend tomorrow. Many of the sectors used to be very different 20 years ago and will probably look very different 20 years from now. So, industry analysis should always be forward-looking. When it comes to tackling how a competitive environment affects a company's strategy, then we talk about strategic analysis. In fact, this is one of the most important components of industry analysis itself, as it helps a firm build up a solid action plan for staying in business. Here, we can rely on the Michael Porter's 5 Forces framework. It was developed in 1979 as a simple but powerful tool for understanding the competitiveness of any business environment. Do you know how Porter came about this model? Well, he recognized that most organizations keep a close watch on their rivals, but he also encouraged them to look beyond the actions of their competitors. So he identified 5 forces that make up the competitive environment. These are the rivalry among existing competitors, threat of new entrants, threat of substitutes, power of buyers, and power of suppliers. Let's examine each of them in more detail, shall we? The first factor has to do with the number and strength of competitors. Rivalry increases in fragmented industries with lots of small firms that offer equivalent products, where each player has a small piece of the market share. That way, even a small gain can have a significant impact on a company's profits. How do you think organizations fight this battle? They simply try to attract customers with aggressive price cuts and high-impact marketing campaigns. Since the offered products are similar, buyers in turn are likely to opt for the better deal. Retailers, restaurants, and consumer packaged goods are typical representatives of these markets. Moreover, companies that have high fixed costs and barriers to exit are quite prone to engaging in fierce competition. On the one hand, they can't just switch to industries with better prospects and attractive profit margins because they have highly specialized assets, which may be difficult to sell or relocate. On the other hand, high fixed costs mean that these companies need to produce more output to cover the high operating leverage. No wonder firms like Boeing and Airbus are in a constant hunt for new orders from customers. Alright, what else? The threat of new entrants is another factor that shapes the competitive industry environment. This force measures how difficult it is for new actors to enter the playing field. The more time and money it costs, the easier it is for established companies to charge higher prices and negotiate better terms. Take a look at some of the major oil players, such as Chevron and ExxonMobil. To compete in this industry, you need substantial capital outlays for facilities and technological know-how. That's not something many business entities can afford. Therefore, we say that the threat of new entrants is rather low there. Fair enough. On a different note, allow us to consider restaurants once more. Here, the threat to new entrants is very high. Anyone with a small amount of capital and some culinary skills can open one, right? Yet, it doesn't mean that we can all earn 3 Michelin stars and be successful. This goes to say that easy market entry does not guarantee business prosperity. Alright, the third factor in the Porter's framework focuses on substitutes. Do you know what these are? Substitutes are products that the customer can switch to as an alternative. For instance, low-cost mobile phones from China are substitutes for Apple and Samsung devices. If substitutes for a company's products are easily available, then the threat is high. As a result, the demand for a firm's products will likely decrease due to the presence of a comparable replacement. On the other hand, more differentiated goods face less price competition. Can you think of an example? Consider the companies that produce patent-protected drugs. Because of their exclusive nature, they can easily raise their prices without reducing demand in their products. We call this high pricing power. Excellent. The next factor in the 5 forces model addresses how easily customers can bargain for lower prices. Check this out. If there are only a few buyers and the costs of switching from one seller's products to another are low, the bargaining power of those buyers is certainly high. When airlines order planes from Airbus and Boeing, they can always choose between the two producers. In addition, there is a limited number of airlines that typically order aircraft in bulk. This makes air travel firms tough negotiators when it comes to selling prices. By contrast, a firm that has many small customers and switching costs are generally high, we will have no trouble charging higher prices. As we know, Microsoft dominates the market for operating systems with more than 180 million users around the world. The company holds close to 90% of the market share, and its customers don't really have a viable alternative to turn to. Naturally, the high switching costs are another factor for the low power of buyers. You can't just opt for a different operating system when you have used Windows for years, right? Okay. Now we should examine the last of the Porter's factors. It touches on how easily suppliers can drive up the cost of inputs. The diamonds industry worldwide has historically been controlled by De Beers, an international corporation that specializes in diamond exploration, mining, and trading. If you are, let's say, in the jewelry business, it would be very hard to find an alternative diamond supplier. As a rule, a limited number of input providers and scarce products give more power to suppliers. On the contrary, when there are many vendors and low switching costs, producers can keep its input costs low, allowing them to boost profits. This is valid for most fast food chains like McDonald's and KFC. They can simply pick the suppliers they wish to work with and replace them whenever needed, because the supplies they usually look for are highly standardized. Excellent! We've just examined the Porter's 5 forces. As markets continue to grow in complexity, this model becomes relevant for analysts who seek to check how the competitive land lies. In reality, practitioners approach such an industry analysis by mainly zooming into 2 of the forces, the threat of new entrants and rivalry among existing competitors. With regard to these 2 focal points, we have listed out the most important questions for you to keep in mind when unriddling them. Sure. To begin with, what are the barriers to entry, and how easy is it for new competitors to challenge the existing market players? In simple terms, high barriers such as patent protection and large capital investments indicate a low threat of new entrants. Next, what is the existing industry concentration? Some markets are fragmented, with lots of companies that possess only a small market share, whereas others offer greater concentration, with a few firms that dominate the industry. Also, what is the production capacity? If companies underutilize their production plants, they are more likely to enter into price wars. The auto industry is a case in point. Okay. Another important question relates to market shares dynamics. Does the industry remain stable, or firms can gain new customers easily? Companies such as Apple have lots of loyal clients. This allowed the firm to keep its market share relatively stable, even when facing fierce competition from Chinese manufacturers. At last, what is the stage of the industry life cycle, and how sensitive are customers to price changes? Other things equal, the more price-sensitive the customers, the greater the price competition, and vice versa.